started with a warning, not an explosion, not a missile, just words. But in moments like this, words can be more dangerous than weapons because they signal intent, they draw lines, and sometimes they set events into motion. Within hours of that warning, the situation changed. Reports began to emerge. Missiles, strikes, smoke rising over distant locations, multiple fronts becoming active at the same time, and suddenly, what seemed like a tense situation began to feel like something much more serious, because this is how escalation begins. Not with a single event, but with a sequence, a chain reaction. And right now, that chain reaction may already be underway. For weeks, tensions had been building across the region. Warnings were exchanged, statements were made, positions hardened. But despite the rising pressure, there was still a sense of control, a belief that the situation, while tense, could remain contained. That belief is now being tested, because what we are seeing today is not just tension. It is movement, active developments, real-world consequences, missiles in the air, strikes on the ground, and uncertainty spreading across multiple borders. The turning point came with a clear message, a warning that if certain targets were hit, there would be a response, not symbolic, not limited, but significant. Warnings like this are not made lightly. They are calculated, carefully worded, designed to send a signal. And in this case, that signal was clear. There are lines, and crossing them would have consequences. But in highly volatile situations, warnings don't always prevent action. Sometimes they set the stage for it. Shortly after the warning, reports began to surface of missile activity, targets being engaged, defenses being activated, and once missiles are involved, the dynamics change instantly, because missiles are not just weapons. They are messages. They demonstrate capability, reach, precision, and intent. Each launch carries meaning. Each strike sends a signal, and each response increases the stakes. This is where escalation becomes dangerous, because it rarely happens in isolation. One action leads to another. A strike leads to retaliation. Retaliation leads to further escalation. And before long, multiple events begin to overlap. Different actors, different locations, all connected by a single thread, a growing conflict. This is what analysts refer to as a chain reaction. And once it starts, it becomes increasingly difficult to control. One of the most concerning developments is the emergence of multiple fronts. Activity is no longer limited to one area. Instead, it is spreading. Different locations becoming active, different groups becoming involved, and when a conflict spreads across multiple fronts, the complexity increases dramatically, because each front adds new variables, new risks, new possibilities for escalation. In situations like this, every move carries meaning. Targets are not chosen randomly. They are selected for their significance, their visibility, their impact. A strike near a sensitive location sends a different message than one in a remote area. It signals intent, capability, and willingness to escalate. These are strategic signals. And right now, those signals are becoming more frequent. Events like these do not go unnoticed. They are monitored closely around the world. Governments, markets, organizations, all watching. Because the implications extend far beyond the region. Any escalation has the potential to affect global stability, political alliances, economic systems, and international security. This is why even localized events can have global consequences. One of the greatest dangers in any escalating conflict is miscalculation, a misunderstanding, a misinterpretation, an action that goes further than intended. Because in high-tension environments, decisions are made quickly, under pressure, with incomplete information. And when multiple actors are involved, the chances of error increase. A single misstep can trigger a much larger response. At this stage, the situation exists in a delicate balance between escalation and control. Efforts may still be made to contain the situation, to limit the scope, to avoid a broader conflict. But at the same time, each new development pushes in the opposite direction, toward expansion, toward greater involvement, toward a point where control becomes harder to maintain. This is the question everyone is asking, and the answer is uncertain. There are multiple possible paths. The situation stabilizes, tensions ease, actions slow down, or the pattern continues. More strikes, more responses, more escalation. At this moment, both possibilities exist, but the direction will depend on what happens next. Behind every headline, there are people, communities, lives affected by events they cannot control, uncertainty, fear, disruption. Because while the focus is often on strategy and geopolitics, the impact is real and immediate. All signs point to one possibility, that the situation is entering a new phase, a phase defined by increased activity, greater risk, and higher stakes. Because once a conflict reaches this stage, it rarely returns to what it was before. It evolves, and often it intensifies. It began with a warning, just words, but those words carried weight. They signaled intent, they drew lines, and within hours, those lines were tested. Missiles followed, responses unfolded, and the situation changed. Because this is how escalation works, not as a single moment, but as a series of steps, each one building on the last, each one raising the stakes, until eventually the situation becomes something else entirely, something larger, something more dangerous. And that is where things stand now, at a moment of uncertainty, a moment of tension, a moment where the next move matters more than ever. Because history has shown that conflicts do not always begin with a single event. Sometimes they begin like this, with warnings, with signals, with actions that seem contained at first, but slowly, quietly they expand until one day. The question is no longer whether the situation is serious, but how serious it has become. And by then, the world is already watching, waiting and hoping that the next step does not go too far.